Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's discussion called Empower Voices with Carleton University's Faculty of Engineering and Design. My name's Hannah Sheridan, and I will be your host for the evening. Before we get started, just a couple opening remarks to remember. So this is a Zoom webinar, which means that attendee microphones and videos are turned off. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A function rather than the chat. We will be monitoring the Q&A section throughout the whole evening, and we are happy to answer any questions you might have. There'll be time for questions after each speaker and as well some at the end of the event, if you think of any later. We have also enabled closed captions as part of this event. So our first speaker is Dr. Adrian Chan, and I am welcome or happy to introduce him to start our discussion today.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It is a pleasure and honor to be here tonight. And to start off with, I'd like to make a land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge and pay respects to the Algonquin Anishinaabe people on whose traditional and unceded territory I live and work. These land acknowledgements for me are a reminder of my commitment to reconciliation, as well as a reminder of my responsibilities both to the land and the people on the land. And as well, a reminder of my own history, including where I've come from and who I am and where I'm going. And so to that, I just want to give you a bit of background information about myself to give you some context and situate myself as well. So my parents are from Hong Kong and Macau, which were under British and Portuguese rule respectively. When they left, they had immigrated to Canada. Myself, I was born in Montreal and raised in Waterloo, Ontario. I have 3 brothers, 2 sisters. I am the second youngest. I'm a cisgendered, able-bodied Asian male, and I'm married to my wife, Brigitte, who is also an engineer. And together we have a son and 3 daughters. So this event, Empower Voices, is related to the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And those are 3 related but distinct concepts. And what I like about this diagram is that it kind of indicates what each of these are. So on the top, you see inclusion, which says it's thoughts and ideas and perspectives of all individuals matter. Diversity on the bottom right, which says multiple identities are represented in an organization. And then I'm on the bottom left, equity, constantly and consistently recognizing and redistributing power. And what I also like about this diagram is it looks at the intersection of these and what happens when one of these elements is missing, and then what also occurs when all 3 are present. And that's that middle part, which is titled belonging. An organization that engages full potential of the individual, where innovation thrives and views, beliefs, and values are integrated. For myself, I have been blessed with typically having a feeling of belonging, which has encouraged me throughout my life and has allowed me to thrive. And I imagine a world where everyone can reach their fullest potential and thrive as well. So I really feel fortunate to be part of the Carleton community. One of the reasons why is because it has EDI, or equity, diversity, and inclusion, as one of its core principles. So I was a member of our strategic planning task force, which led to the creation of Carleton's strategic integrated plan. And that strategic integrated plan guides all major actions within the university. Pictured on the right here is a word cloud that's shown in the strategic integrated plan. And that word cloud was created from all of the consultations that we had during the for the planning task force. And so from this word cloud, you can see that EDI clearly emerges from the community voices during the consultation. You'll see words like inclusivity, accessibility, diversity as one of the major elements that arise from the word cloud. The plan itself has this phrase, which I love. It says, sustainability is the wellness of the planet. Wellness is the sustainability of individuals. And I believe this is relevant to EDI because to me, EDI is inextricably linked to individual wellness as well as collective resilience. So for myself, EDI is a part of everything I do. It's incorporated in my classroom teaching, my activities as a biomedical engineering researcher, my approach to supervision of my research assistants, how I engage with the community, including industry, government, and not-for-profits, as well as in my administrative roles, including when I served as Associate Dean in the Faculty of Graduate and Postdoctoral Affairs, as well as when I served as Assistant Vice President Academic of the university. One particular EDI focus I have is in the area of accessibility, and that is accessibility as it pertains primarily to people with disabilities. Carleton is known both nationally and internationally as a leader in accessibility. Alfred Spencer, formerly of the Accessibility Directorate of Ontario, had this phrase. He said that Carleton has a culture of accessibility. So when we talk about accessibility, it refers to products, services, and environments, and whether they have the flexibility to meet individual needs and preferences, particularly for people with disabilities. Good accessible design is necessary for some, important for many, and benefits everyone. And you can see this pictured here, and this phenomenon is known as the curb cut effect. Curb cuts were first introduced by people with disabilities near Stanford University, where they took basically tools and smashed up sidewalks to create the first curb cuts to allow people using mobility devices such as wheelchairs to exit curbs onto the street level. And now you see curb cuts everywhere, and curb cuts are used by multiple people, including people who use wheelchairs, but as well as people pushing strollers, pulling luggage, riding bicycles or skateboards. And so you can see how it's necessary for some, important for many, but benefits everyone. Other instances of this curb cut effect you can see with text-to-speech readers, automatic door openers, and closed captioning, all three of which I use myself. I use text-to-speech because sometimes I like to listen to what I've written because I find it's easier to hear the mistakes in my writing. I use a lot of automatic door openers, especially when I'm carrying loads of stuff. And I find closed captioning is useful to improve my perception of speech, as well when watching TV and my kids are trying to sleep and I don't want to make too much noise. Closed captioning is great. It's like keep the volume down. To me, accessible design is simply good design. I currently serve as the Director of the Research and Education in Accessibility Design and Innovation, or READY program. The READY program is the first interdisciplinary post-secondary accessibility training program offered in Canada. It is funded by NSERC, which is one of the major national funding agencies, with a $1.65 million grant. It is led by Carleton in collaboration with the University of Ottawa and Queen's University. And it was created to fill in this gap, which is the lack of accessibility education, particularly in engineering and design. And so this fills that kind of need. READY has helped train the next generation of leaders who will help progress our journey towards a more accessible and inclusive society. And if you get a chance to visit our website, which is shown at the top there, www.create-ready.ca, under the news items, you'll see a bunch of news items related to some of the students who participated in the program. Iman, for example, was named one of the top 50 women leaders in Toronto. Patricia received the prestigious Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation Scholarship and Joseph Armand Bombardier Canada Graduate Scholarship. Adrian Volenslikov was interviewed by CBC to talk about his research in designing accessible board games. And Dawson Clark received the Senate Medal for Outstanding Academic Achievement for his thesis research. And so you can see how amazing some of these students are within READY, and how you can imagine them as future leaders of Canada as well. Next slide. I also serve as the director of a new lab called the Abilities Living Lab. This is funded by the Canada Foundation for Innovation with a nearly $6 million grant. And this new research lab will serve as a hub for accessibility research, as well as a catalyst for innovation, linking university researchers to community. And there we're going to kind of tackle the number of different barriers that people with disabilities face, again, pursuing that more inclusive and accessible society. Next slide. I've also had the pleasure to serve as a member of the Equity and Inclusive Communities Advisory Group, which is a university level department. And this group has helped create the university's EDI action plan, which is a set of concrete actions that progresses the university towards a more inclusive organization. My own faculty, the Faculty of Engineering and Design, last year created an EDI council, and I have the honor of chairing this council. And we are currently just finishing our faculty level EDI action plan, which will complement the university level 1. The university also has Kinamagawin, which is translated as learning together. Kinamagawin represents Carleton University's calls to action, which is part of its role and responsibilities to truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. For myself, I have completed the Kinamagawin Indigenous Learning Certificate as part of my commitment to continual learning, which expands my knowledge and my capacity to serve as an ally to the Indigenous community. Carleton University also has these Indigenous learning bundles, which were created by my colleague, Professor Conte Horn-Miller. And these bundles can be integrated into courses to introduce students to Indigenous ways of knowing. And so for myself, I incorporated these Indigenous learning bundles in my own undergrad biomedical engineering courses. Carleton is also part of the Experiential Learning in Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship, or ELITE program for Black youth. ELITE was originally launched with the University of Alberta in 2021, and Carleton represents ELITE's first engagement outside of Alberta. Ricky Iguabor is a fourth-year aerospace engineer and is currently a research assistant supervised by myself and a couple of my colleagues on a project, a biomedical engineering project, which is looking at safe neonatal transport between hospitals and sites in collaboration with the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario. And it's fabulous to have students like Ricky participating actively in our research activities as well. I also serve as the co-chair of Carleton University's Healthy Workplace, which has the mission of ensuring a healthy environment, both physically, mentally, professionally, and socially within the university. Carleton University has been recognized multiple times for excellence, including the Canada Order of Excellence Healthy Workplace certification, platinum level mental health at work certification, gold and bronze level excellence, innovation, and wellness certification for different divisions as well. This year, we were recognized as one of Canada's top 100 employers, as well as receiving gold for the sustainable tracking and assessment of rating systems. And to me, when we think about health and wellness, again, it's inextricably linked to EDI. And I wanted to point out in particular mental health, which is a significant area of concern for universities, including Carleton. At Carleton, we are fortunate to have our president, Dr. Benoit Antoine Bacon, who has shared his own lived experiences with mental health. And that is, to have leadership share those experiences is such a gift and helps break the stigma associated with mental health and has allowed mental health to be part of our daily conversations. In addition, I've tried to be an active ally for women in science and engineering. I believe the pursuit of equity cannot solely rely upon women. I believe that sexism, racism, ableism are all wrong, and that belief compels me to be as active as I can, and goes beyond to simply, buying a T-shirt and wearing it to show support. I think we need to be active in our actions if we're actually committed to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and follow the leadership from members of equity-denied communities. So as part of male allyship, I've participated in a number of active panels, including the Queen's Women in Applied Science and Engineering Conference with Microsoft Canada, Canada Post, and then for the upcoming International Week for Women, I'll be participating in another panel with Shared Services Canada as well. The past 3 years has been noticeably disruptive because of the COVID pandemic. And like everyone, Carleton has had its own struggles. But I believe, thanks to the values that we have associated with EDI, that we actually did quite well. When the pandemic first hit, Carleton quickly adapted to develop new people-centric policies such as compassionate grading. For myself, I hired some undergraduate students through our Carleton Students as Partners program, where undergraduate students work with me to redesign all of my courses to shift from the in-person to online experience. And what this helped with was ensuring a quality student experience for that new online experience, especially for that first year of the pandemic. Alex Usher, who is a post-secondary expert and president of Higher Education Strategy Associates, in one of his interviews talking about the pandemic in post-secondary education, noted, "Carleton is one that just stands out for me as having had exceptional leadership through a pandemic." And I think a lot of that is thanks to, again, our core values related to EDI. EDI to me leads to mutual trust and respect, which in turn leads to strong, resilient communities, which in turn helps lead us to a society that is inclusive, accessible, and innovative, and where we can all thrive. Thank you so much. I'm proud to be part of this community that is called Carleton, and I've been pleased to have the opportunity to share some of my experiences and contributions tonight.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adrian, for those thoughtful remarks and what Carleton has in the realm of equity, diversity, and inclusivity. Now is an excellent time for any questions that you have specifically for Adrian. Again, there'll be times for questions throughout the whole event. And it seems like we do have one question in the chat, or in the Q&A, sorry. Can you please speak further about plans/programs that Carleton currently has to make campus more accessible?
Thank you. So as one of the other activities I was part of, I was co-chair to create Carleton's coordinated accessibility strategy, which I believe is one of the, I think it's the first accessibility strategies for a post-secondary education institution in Canada. And what's exciting about that is it is really focused on what you're saying. It's like, how do we take the campus where we're at and move it to be more accessible? When we talk about accessibility, we're looking at this quite broadly, both visible and invisible disabilities, and as well as all aspects of life at a university. And so there are 7 different pillars or areas of focus that the coordinated accessibility has. This includes coordination and leadership, education and training, information and communications, physical campus, employment and employee support, student services, and research and development. And so we're looking at not just the, a lot of people think about accessibility in terms of physical campus, which Carleton is actually quite accessible thanks to our tunnel system. But it goes beyond that physical access, right? It talks about employment policies, how the classroom experience is, how the digital experiences as well. And so, yeah. I think there's many, if you look at the coordinated accessibility strategy, again, it outlines like some really concrete directions that we're heading. And we're also developing a new landing page for Carleton accessibility, which is www.carleton.ca/accessibility, which you can see a number of different projects and initiatives that we're involved with.
Amazing. Thank you. Are there any, it looks like we've also posted that link to our chat. So if you want to look to it further, you can have a look through the link in the chat. We'll pause here for a couple seconds more to see if there are any questions popping into our Q&A function from the audience. And then we will move on to our next speaker. So again, any questions for Adrian Chan, please just post them in the Q&A function of our discussion here. If you can't think of one now or still are unsure of what to ask, we'll have some time at the end as well for questions to all of our speakers tonight. Okay, I think we'll move on to our next speaker, and if we miss a question, we can come back to it closer to the end. So our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Christine Riddell, who graduated from Interactive Multimedia and Design and is now currently the manager of our Outreach and Engagement team. Thank you for joining us, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Hannah. Yes, as Hannah mentioned, I graduated from our interactive multimedia and design program here at Carleton. I started working with our youth outreach programs as a student and then joined our outreach and engagement team full-time after graduation. So I have the pleasure of sharing with you tonight a few of our programs, focusing just on a few key programs for our EDI initiatives that focus on both youth, incoming students, as well as current students. So you can see here, those are our elite employment program for Black youth, which Adrian touched on as well. Our elite program for female applicants to engineering and IT, our girls youth outreach programs, and our in STEM program, which is Indigenous youth in STEM. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our elite program, which Adrian kind of briefly touched on, I'm gonna dive into just a little bit more. So ELITE stands for the Experiential Learning and Innovation Technology and Entrepreneurship Program for Black youth. Next slide, please. So as Adrian mentioned, the program was launched at University of Alberta, with Carleton becoming the second host location last year. So summer 2023 will be our second year hosting the ELITE program. We started with a group of current Carleton students, university students last summer, and this year we'll also be hosting some youth high school students as well. So the program is targeted at Black youth between the ages of 15 and 22 to develop hands-on skills in kind of just a few examples being like robotics, automation, advanced manufacturing, engineering, and a lot of really other interesting topics as well. So students are placed in technical internships at exciting host locations from a really wide variety of industry partners, and also some university research projects such as the one Adrian mentioned. ELITE participants also participate one day a week in leadership and entrepreneurship training, as well as participate in career counseling and coaching. So these workshops also provide a really great opportunity for the students to connect with each other and kind of build on some of those technical skills and really turn them from the classroom into what they're able to work on in the summer, and also getting some really valuable career coaching and mentorship to kind of get them ready for the workforce as well. Moving on to our LEAP program, our Leading Engineering Applicant Program. So this invites high-achieving female and non-binary engineering and IT applicants to Ottawa for a weekend. This program includes events, panels, engagement with industry professionals, STEM activities, tours, and the opportunity to connect with other applicants. So this picture here at the Ottawa sign is from this year's cohort. And in looking just a little bit at the impact of LEAP, we hear a lot from these students themselves once they end up being students here at Carleton. But to kind of look at the numbers of that, our cohort last year from 2022, 65% of them accepted their offers to our engineering and IT programs here at Carleton and are now studying as current students. And we really see this kind of community that they build and really feel comfortable in their classes, and already knowing people kind of coming in on their first day of, a little bit of a scary university, like in a new environment. So we actually host a LEAP reunion every fall as well. So all of the years of LEAP get invited to this to kind of reconnect and also meet students in upper years and have that kind of natural mentorship as well. So for this year's event, which actually just took place just over a week ago, we accepted 51 students, and we'll hope to see many of them here in the fall with us as well. Moving on to some of our youth outreach programs. So our youth outreach programs do reach youth from kindergarten all the way to grade 12. So some of them kind of right up until they start in their post-secondary kind of future careers. So although these youth outreach programs, virtual ventures, did start in 2000, we hosted our first girls camp in 2000. Since that time, we've kind of continued expanding those programs as we still see a pretty big need for these kind of safe spaces. So we host these opportunities for girls in grades 3 to 12, including summer camps, Saturday clubs, as well as a really large variety of events. You may have heard of things like Go Eng Girl or Go Code Girl, which are delivered as a network member of the Ontario Network of Women in Engineering, which has actually expanded outside of Ontario now, as well as special events like Tackle Tech is one of the ones we host, and some Girl Guide badge days, Girl Guide workshops, things like that as well. Next slide, please. And our last program that I wanted to share a bit about is our InSTEM program. So InSTEM stands for Indigenous Youth in STEM. These programs are now taking place across the country as part of the network of STEM programs at institutions that we're a part of. But we here at Carleton delivered the very first credit granting land camp in Akwesasne in 2017 and have been delivering this camp in that same community every year since. So a bit about it, this 10-day on the land camp engages Indigenous youth in connecting traditional knowledge and Western STEM concepts. And this year we'll actually be delivering a second location in a new community in addition to the one in Akwesasne that we're continuing to deliver every summer. This program really provides an opportunity for Indigenous youth to see STEM connections in traditional teachings, free of cost, and really breaks down barriers for Indigenous youth to achieve high school credits in an alternative and more hands-on learning environment. And we really see an amazing outcome from that. In summer 2022, we also were able to host a group of teachers and educators as part of that camp program for 4 of the days to earn a micro-credential and provide training to incorporate Indigenous land-based knowledge into their own classrooms. Perfect. So that is it for me. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Christine. It's always awesome to hear what you guys offer. We do have a question from the audience. Have you had the opportunity to see youth, specifically girls, progress from the youth programs that you mentioned into post-secondary STEM programs? And then kind of a follow-up, if so, have any of them mentioned these programs helped them make the decision to pursue STEM in university?
It's a great question. I have kind of 2 answers to that. One of them being we do try to track the youth who attend specifically our summer camps because it's kind of the longest impact that we see them in some of our events as well. And we tend to do these every few years and kind of see how many of these youth who attend our programs are actually here now. So kind of the hard stat answer is about 20% of youth who were eligible who ended up at Carleton were women. So we're still kind of about that 20% mark. However, I will kind of, I guess, give a caveat to that is these programs have been going on for a long time, but we see youth as young as grade 3. So it does take a really long time to see that kind of return that, you know, our youth are old enough to actually be in university at this point. So I think it is a really long lead up to actually see those youth be old enough to actually apply and end up in post-secondary. So I think that number is just going to continue to grow as our youth kind of age into that category. My other answer being kind of circumstantial is in my time here, which has been almost 10 years now working with our youth outreach programs. Every year that I've been here, at least one of the current students who helped deliver these programs has been a camper with us in one of our girls' programs. So we're really seeing them kind of want to reinvest into the next group of youth who end up doing these programs. So like they themselves, you know, went to our girls' camp and then applied to engineering or IT or one of our design programs, and then they come back and work with us to help kind of the next generation.
Yeah, it's always amazing to hear and to see. I was wondering if you could speak a bit more on the students working as staff side of it all, because I'm sure some of the people watching would be interested in that as a job opportunity if they were to come to Carleton.
Yeah, definitely. So for those youth outreach programs and also for some of our recruitment programs as well, we hire current students and they deliver this kind of programming to youth. So like we do have a full-time outreach and engagement team kind of manages and coordinates these types of events. But you can, as a current student, work and deliver these types of programs, like focus on EDI and like our summer camps. There's such a huge range and we hire a lot of students. There's actually almost 100 employment opportunities at this point between our entire team for current students every year, and kind of inspire the next generation. And we really try to make sure we have a lot of different voices in a space like this to make sure all youth can really see themselves in this kind of place, right? It really helps to see someone who looks like you, who you can connect to, you can relate to. You might even have, some similarities in your background or whatever that may be. So we really do try to have a diverse set of current students who can help deliver these kinds of programs.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that great conversation. Again, we'll wait a minute or so to see if any other questions do pop up in our Q&A, and then we'll move on to our next and final speaker. So again, if you have any questions, go ahead, feel free to pop them in the Q&A, or you can use the chat function as well. And we would be happy to answer them. Again, we'll have time at the end of this session as well. Okay, I think we're safe to move forward, and then if there's any at the end, we can address them then. Our next speaker is going to give us a bit of a different perspective on EDI. And our next speaker is Sarah Brown, who's currently a PhD candidate and has graduated from mechanical engineering. And I will pass it over to you.
Thanks so much, Hannah. I've actually really enjoyed learning about all of the programs because it's actually not something that I have heard too much about already, and I'm kind of ashamed to say that I haven't heard too much about it, but I feel a lot more informed now, and I'm going to go pursue some of those, learn more about those programs after this. But I'm just going to mention, I love the Virtual Ventures program. I love seeing them on campus, and I've given a tour to some of the Virtual Ventures campers to our research facility, which is pictured here on the slide, this house. And I remember one summer, one of the students, I mean, they couldn't have been older than like 10, and they were grilling me on like the insulation levels of the house. And I was just like so impressed, but also a little intimidated that I didn't have the answers that they wanted. So, just like really great programs. And I only have great things to say about Carleton. But as Hannah mentioned, I have like a bit of a different presentation to give. It's a bit more anecdotal about kind of my experience as a woman working in STEM, particularly in engineering. So yeah, just a bit of background. I'm a PhD candidate. I'm hoping to defend in the spring, fingers crossed everyone, in the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. I'm under the supervision of Professor Ian Bosley-Morrison. As Hannah mentioned, I completed my undergrad at Carleton in mechanical engineering in 2017. Started my master's right after that, and I accelerated from a master's to a PhD in 2018. So I've been at Carleton 10 years or just over 10 years now, and I'm clearly a fan of Carleton, and I'm happy to talk about why I'm a fan to anybody who's interested. But I've had a long-standing interest in sustainability and specifically solar energy. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And I do research solar energy in the Little Red House that was pictured on the last slide. It's at the front of Carleton's campus, if anybody's gone by and seen it. If you thought the president lived there or anything, it's not. It's just a bunch of really tired grad students who are trying to get their thesis done. So really cool facility that we're really blessed to have. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you guys about my experiences as a woman in STEM and the importance of my perspective on the importance of diversity in STEM. So just talking a little bit about this slide. Why did I gravitate to STEM? Why did I choose engineering? My first interest in engineering involved an I Spy book, and I don't know if anybody is familiar with these books. I had one as a kid, and they're kind of like a Where's Waldo type book, but for objects. So you get like a weird, fun, cluttered picture, and then you have a list of things you have to find in the picture. And anyway, my favorite puzzle from these books was the one pictured actually on the left here. And it's a Rube Goldberg machine, and which is basically a chain reaction style machine. So you do one thing to start the machine off, and then basically a bunch of chain reactions go from there. So in this one, it's kind of maybe hard to see, but on the top left, there's a little pencil with a finger on it, and you, in theory, would push that, and it would push a marble down the ramps. And I just loved, I would stare at this picture and I trace out how the chain reaction would go and what would happen. And I started, building little versions of these machines at home. And I look back on it now, and I guess that was kind of my start into engineering, but nobody told me it was engineering at the time, and I didn't realize it, but I really loved to make them. And I was also part of a solar powered car club in grade 7 and 8. And we would design and build cars out of like really basic materials, basically like cardboard and a lot of hot glue. I burnt my fingers a lot during that time. And we would race them at the Science and Tech Museum in Ottawa against a bunch of other schools that had this type of club. My two friends and I, who are pictured in the middle, we were the only all-girl team that was at the competition, and we won by a landslide 2 years in a row. So that was kind of, again, one of my first experiences with engineering, and I didn't really know these things were engineering at the time. But yeah, looking back now, I always had an interest in designing and building kind of from a young age. Can I get the next slide? So the path to my PhD in solar energy really, yes, starts back at that solar powered car club. I didn't know what I wanted to do in university. Knew I liked math, knew I liked sciences, not biology. That was not really my jam, but yeah, physics I thrived in. Chemistry I dealt with, and yeah, really liked math. And I was flipping through, again, this is maybe dating me a little bit, but Carleton used to send out like a physical book that you got to like all the universities sent one out, and you could flip through the different programs that were available. And I basically was flipping through, and I saw the FSAE race car, which is the picture here kind of on the bottom. On the engineering, sorry, thank you for pointing. I saw it on the mechanical engineering page, and basically I just thought, well, you know, I like making solar powered cars. Maybe I'd like making other cars. I don't know. And that was really the what made my decision to go to mechanical engineering. That's how I picked my university program. Really not more complicated than that. Once I was in university, I pursued sustainability related co-op placements. I spent 12 months working with the Minto sustainability team, and I learned a lot about what it takes to make buildings sustainable. A little bit easy for new builds, a lot harder for things that already exist, which is most of our building stock. So learned a lot about sustainability in buildings. And then after my co-op terms, I returned to campus. And the Cheer House, which is the Urbandale Center for Home Energy Research, which is this little red house that I speak of, that I spend a lot of time on. It's on the front of Carleton's campus. It was just finishing construction at the time when I returned to campus. And I thought, man, that looks like something really cool that I'd be interested in working on. So I contacted my supervisor, Professor Beausoleil Morrison, and asked if I could help out with research at the house. And that was in 2015. And I worked as an undergraduate researcher for 2 years before continuing my grad studies at this house and, you know, bring me to where I am today. And I'm actually still researching the exact same mechanical system that I spent 2 years installing at the house in my undergrad. I spent a lot of hours in the basement of that house plumbing and trying to fix leaks in my plumbing. And I'm a much better plumber now. I've installed a few things that my partner and I just bought a house. And one of the many skills that came out of my PhD was the ability to do some minor plumbing in my house. So did a lot of practice there. But yeah, so I'm still researching the same system. That's kind of my path I took. So the story of how I ended up in my PhD kind of has, you know, in engineering kind of has a bit of a deeper meaning when we're talking about women in STEM. You know, and really the story is the deeper meaning is it's so important to expose young folks and, you know, particularly young girls to STEM. You know, I had been considering medicine and a couple of other, you know, post-grad programs for a long time instead of engineering, because I really knew nothing about engineering for a really long time. And if I hadn't done that solar powered car club, I don't think I'd really be where I am today. So yes, that's kind of important there. And another story that's kind of related to that is that I'm actually very distantly related to Canadian astronaut Steve McLean. And I was invited to Cape Canaveral. Well, I wasn't invited. My grandparents were invited to Cape Canaveral to watch in 2006 to watch his launch on the Space Shuttle Atlantis. And I got brought along. My grandparents brought myself and my cousin along. The launch was delayed because the shuttle got struck by lightning, so I didn't get to see the launch live, and, you know, just not recommended to launch space shuttles into the atmosphere when it's hurricane season in Florida. But I've been aware and interested in space and, you know, this space exploration and space research basically since then. And it's a picture of me at the banquet for the space shuttle launch. I got to meet a whole bunch of, you know, astronauts who were there, and I have like that hat that I have on there is signed by a bunch of the astronauts, and it's one of my most prized possessions that I have. My partner, who's pictured in the middle with me in our scuba gear, has a side dream of becoming an astronaut, which is why we did the scuba training, because he said it made him one step closer to becoming an astronaut. So on a drive one day from a cottage, we were talking about kind of what jobs I would pursue post-grad. And he said to me, you can do anything you want in any industry you want, even space. They're going to need buildings in space one day. And that was, the only prompting I needed to get the gears moving in my head. My research group does a lot of work with building performance simulation, which is, building in such a program is shown kind of middle, second from the left. There we go. Thank you. And yes, we do a lot of, building simulation work to model buildings on a computer and analyze their energy performance and their indoor environmental quality. So the picture in the middle is my interpretation of cheer in one of those programs. And basically, after my partner said that, I pursued a research project, a little bit of a, not related to my thesis, a little bit of a side project to see if we could use these building performance simulation programs to model buildings in space. And spoiler alert, there's a lot of adjustments that would need to happen to accurately model the reduced gravity field. A lot of heat transfer gets really mucked up really quickly as soon as gravity goes away. But all of this kind of long-winded story to say, your experiences as a kid influence your decisions and your experiences as an adult. And I'm sitting here in near PhD in mechanical engineering as evidence of why it's just so important to make a point of exposing young girls to STEM and things that involve STEM. So yeah, just that's kind of my experience with it. And if I could grab the next slide. I'm very lucky to have been surrounded by amazing women in all levels of my engineering education. I had a lot of smart, strong women colleagues in undergrad. I had an amazing woman supervisor for one of my co-op terms, and man, she could command a team like nobody I've ever seen. My research group is, given the numbers of women in mechanical engineering, my research group is a bit of an outlier. We're actually predominantly women in our research group. So I'm really lucky to just have been surrounded by so many amazing women, but I'm also just so incredibly lucky to have had allies while I've been at Carleton too. My partner, one of my strongest allies, my supervisor, the chair of our department, just everybody they're all so supportive and they advocate so strongly for women in STEM. So even if there aren't a lot of women in engineering, even now, our numbers are growing, but still, definitely in the minority there, having strong and competent women and good allies has always just made such a big difference for me. So it hasn't always been easy, though. And one of my most notable stories along the lines of this are during one of my co-op terms, I was tasked with going up to Coral Harbor, Nunavut, to single-handedly supervise a crew of industrial painters. And the crew was entirely made up of men. So they were tasked with painting these tanks, which are pictured on the left. And my supervisor thought, she's like, oh, this will be such a fun experience for a co-op. It'll be easy. She can just go up and watch them paint. She's basically like, it's easy. She'll just watch paint dry. Like, it'll be fine. Thinking that the crew was going to, follow the specs. And unfortunately, they were kind of ill prepared for the project. So the team I was supervising was not particularly pleased with being supervised on site in general. And they made a lot of remarks about l'inspectrice and didn't see me as a threat when I met up with them at the airport. And they kind of thought like they were, upset about being supervised, but then thought, oh, it's just, this girl, it won't be that hard. And I quickly had to show them that I wasn't easily pushed over and I wasn't going to, I was going to make sure that the work was done properly. And, I was yelled at, I had hard hats thrown at me. I was often overstepped to superiors in my group, and I had to work really hard to remind them that, I had authority on the project and on site. And this experience was difficult, but thankfully it was one of my, only experiences like this of not being taken seriously as a young woman in engineering. And I learned a lot from it, and I've really grown from that. So very thankful that hasn't been a regular occurrence, but it does happen still, unfortunately. And just in closing, I wanted to reiterate that diversity matters. When I was teaching thermodynamics in 2020, I had a student in my class send me an email at the end of the semester. I was talking about the semester and how they enjoyed the class. And what she said really stuck with me since, and I wanted to share it with you guys now, which basically when people ask me why it's important to prioritize diversity, I bring the student's message up. And they said these all seem, like small and insignificant things, but as a girl in engineering who doesn't have a lot of female role models in STEM to look up to, this semester has been a real treat. And this kind of goes back to one of my favorite sayings, which is, we can't be what we can't see. So it's just so important that we prioritize representation as much as possible in all teams and in all aspects. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say. Yeah, thank you. And again, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you guys have any questions, I can certainly take them now.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's always so interesting to hear everybody's different perspectives. I guess one thing I forgot to mention also is I'm a graduate from engineering as well. I actually did biomedical and mechanical. And it's always awesome to connect with other alum who are doing amazing things at Carleton and around the world. We do have a question from our audience. Do you have any advice for someone who's unsure if they want to pursue engineering? I'm worried about studying in a male-dominated field.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, and yeah, valid, feelings and things that I certainly thought about when I was entering engineering. If I can be any reassurance, it's male dominated, but man, the women that you see come through engineering, so strong. And so I really just had such a good pack of women and men. I had a lot of great, male colleagues when I was going through, or men colleagues when I was going through my undergrad, but just, really had a strong group of women who could, we could commiserate and we could work together. And it was really great. And so I would say, I totally understand the feeling, and I was definitely there. And if you're at all interested in engineering, it's such a great program. There's so many different aspects of engineering too that I didn't even realize existed. I was worried that I was like, well, I'm not someone, I'm not, someone who grew up working in their garage on cars, and you have this idea of what engineering's like and what the kind of people who are in it. But there's just so much more than that. People of all different skills can really just excel in engineering. People with management skills, team building skills, and there's so many different types of engineering that if you thrive more in the biology, chemistry side, again, Dr. Chan mentioned he's a biomedical, mechanical engineering. So, we have tons of, areas there. Those are things that I didn't even know existed when I was going through school. So, I would say for a lot of my time at Carleton, I actually I didn't realize it was a male dominated, or not that I didn't realize it was male dominated, but I didn't notice it in my day-to-day life at Carleton. And the departments are definitely changing. There's significantly more women profs than there was when I was going through engineering. There's been just a really big push to make that representation and so much better for women coming through the program. So I would say if you're at all interested, please don't let that deter you, because it's such a great program. And I've just loved it so much. And I would just be so sad if that was the reason that you didn't do it. It's a lot better. It's getting better. It's going to continue to get better. And the more we talk about it, the better it'll become. So it's kind of my advice. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that as well.
I mean, I can definitely say that just in the position that I hold now at Carleton, it's exciting to see the group that we're kind of bringing together in females in engineering and in IT. I think it's awesome to see, as Christine mentioned, some of them starting at such a young age and leading up to and then coming to Carleton. And we're building this very unique network that we can keep together for years to come through school, through masters, if they do a master's, PhD, or through the workforce. And there's no better kind of way to connect people in that way and for years to come. So it's amazing to see. We do have another question specifically for Dr. Chan. They said, I really enjoyed hearing about your efforts as an ally. What has the reaction from your women peers been?
It's been very receptive, actually, and good. I think it's been helpful in that as an ally, I feel like I am being led, I guess, by my female colleagues, right? As an example, it is, I think, a worry that you're trying to do something for or to someone, I guess, rather than doing it with. And I go back to the concept of equity, which is recognizing and redistributing power, right? And so my role as an ally is also something that is not a title that I would give myself. It's something that, I try to be. And if my colleagues believe I am, then I am, kind of stuff. But it is ensuring that I'm taking the time to inform myself. So I spend a lot of time attending conferences, reading books, attending webinars, and learning, so that I increase my own capacity first, and not rely on my colleagues to kind of teach me things, right? I'm trying to unburden, I guess, and contribute to that path. And so there's a lot of great resources out there, and I take it seriously. Like I take, when they're saying, you need to inform yourself before you do something, I take that guidance to heart and act upon it, and remain open constantly to feedback as well, which is sometimes hard. Feedback, whether it's constructive and from a good place, is always difficult to take. But nevertheless, I do try to take that to heart, because I always try to keep up the what is the goal, I guess, in mind. And so receiving feedback, taking some time to settle that in is helpful as well. I hope that I've been made positive contributions. The feedback I've gotten so far has been positive, so I'm feeling good.
Amazing. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. We have a couple more minutes here, so we'll hang out and see if anybody else has questions in the Q&A. It was amazing hearing from, there is another one, right as I say it, in the Q&A. I'm deciding between studying at Carleton and a few other schools. What makes Carleton's community special or different from other schools? This is probably a good question for Sarah and Christine to answer, having both taken an undergrad at Carleton and other education, and now either working or pursuing other things here. So maybe we can start with Christine and then move to Sarah.
Sure. Yeah, I can share, I guess, a bit about my experience personally, and then also through how I work. Personally, my experience was really great. IT is also, from my own kind of personal experience, it's fairly male dominated. So I think I was also a little bit nervous kind of going into that, and just not really knowing what to expect. But Carleton, from everything I saw as a student and what kind of made me want to stick around and work too, was just such a welcoming environment. And I think you can really kind of find your people, is what I'd like to call it. It's there's just so many opportunities, so many groups that you can find similar interests with. And I think both inside and outside the classroom, I had really great professors who were really open to feedback, to even on things like EDI in their courses. And I was always really impressed by how open those kinds of conversations were. And then kind of in my work life, both as a student working on some of these initiatives and now full-time as well, it's really just awesome to see how the staff care about students. I think the students really care about each other and really have built strong connections and strong clubs that sustain and really try to make sure that our students feel supported. But the staff, I find, really care. And that's something I hear a lot from students as well, that you can tell that people really want to make sure our students feel supported.
Amazing. Yeah, I know when I was in school, I definitely connected with some of my professors in ways that I was not expecting to necessarily, because it can be intimidating to introduce yourself to your professor and let them, give a name to the face or face to the name and kind of proceed through that course. So it's a very unique perspective. Sarah, what is your opinion, or what are your thoughts of Carleton's community?
Yeah, I mean, I've been here 10 years, so I'm clearly, a big fan, like I said. Yeah, I think just going off of what Christine was saying, truly, I just haven't always felt like I was, valued and important at Carleton. And yeah, just mostly in my speaking at kind of the biggest interactions with my profs and stuff. I've heard of other people going to other schools and saying oh, I'm kind of just a number there. And I never felt like a number at Carleton. I always felt like the profs knew who I was. I'd be studying in the hallway and my prof would walk by and be like, oh, how'd you find the midterm? Or how's that assignment going? Or I saw you didn't do, great on that one. Is there something that I'm not doing in class or I could do better in class, just looking for feedback and really just caring about the students. And I thought that was such a a difference from experiences that I heard from some of my friends who had gone to other schools. Just really feeling like, yeah, part of a community, and that not just a number, and that they knew who I was as an individual. And when people kind of know you as an individual and care about you as an individual, it makes the whole experience a lot better. If I was sick a week or having a really rough mental health week or something, I never felt scared about going to my prof and explaining that to them and seeing if they could accommodate that in some way and give me, extensions on assignments and things like that. And so I think just that care that I always felt, and yeah, part of the community, which was always really great. But also the Carleton's engineering community is just so impressive, and there's a lot of effort that goes into making it just like a great community where you can get involved a lot. There's so many examples I could give of just clubs, initiatives, things where I met people, and yeah, like going through my graduating class, I was I knew pretty much everybody who had gone across, not just in my program but in other engineering programs too, I'd gotten to interact with. And I just have so many good things to say about Carleton's community. It was really important to me. I came from a bit of a small high school that felt like I had a really big impact on, and I really wanted to carry that feeling forward in my post-secondary. And I was really nervous about losing that, but I really felt like I kept that at Carleton, where there's so many opportunities to get involved, have an impact, meet up with people. And I just always felt like people knew who you were as an individual, and not just as, someone paying to be there kind of. So.
If I can add to this, I've had the fortune of experiencing a number of different universities. So I did my undergrad at the University of Waterloo, and then I did my master's at the University of Toronto, my PhD in the University of New Brunswick, and then came to Carleton. So I've actually experienced a range of universities, both really small and really large. And I agree with what's been said here. Like, Carleton has like this, it's hard to describe it. It has a very community-like feeling. It's a very tight-knit community. Staff that work at Carleton seem to be here for long periods of time, as an example. And I remember my first year at Carleton, I'd walk down the hall, and there was a maintenance worker, Carl, that would stop and say, "Hey, Adrian, how's it going?" And we would talk for a while, and he would tell me about his day and ask me what I'm doing. I walk further down the hall, and I'd run into the president of the university, and they would talk to me and say, "Hey, Adrian, how's it going?" And we would talk for a while. And it's just like, you can talk to everyone, and everyone kind of knows you, and has that community and care portion to it. I think is quite distinct.
Yeah, I could not agree more with you. I felt like every time I would walk from, for example, residence to Israeli Pavilion, which is like on the other side of campus, basically, or the library, I would probably run into 5 to 10 different people, a mixture of students and professors, and it would be very similar conversations I'd have when talking to students and professors. So everybody was very relaxed, and it is very community centric, and the campus lends to that as well. We do have one last question that it looks like Hunter might be typing an answer to, but if anybody wants to speak for any specific clubs that focus on allyship and building community. So if anybody, for example, knows more about CUYs or NGQueers or any of those and would like to speak for them, you are welcome to.
Speak to a few. One of my PhD students was president of CUYs, which is Carleton University Women in Science and Engineering, for like years. And so there's that Women Science and Engineering Club that's focused on women science and engineering. There's NGQueers. One of the students was serving as the president of that society, and I've been increasingly finding more information about it to be active with that as well. And then there's a bunch of other student, like a ton of other student clubs that are not EDI focused, but each of them, I think, have taken on EDI as part of their activities. Like the main student organization, CSES, Carleton Society for, I don't know what it stands for.
Student Engineering Society.
Engineering Society. As an example, I know quite a few of the executives there, and the students themselves have taken on a very active role in looking at how EDI fits into their own programming. And you can see that, reflected into, the evolution of things like orientation and different activities that they put out there. So I would say, yes, there are certain clubs that are focused on EDI and allyship directly, but it's being more pervasive, which I think is great. So it's not just media focused one, but it's part of everything that we do.
I can speak a little bit to the Women in Engineering and IT program, which isn't a club, but it's a program that was put out by Carleton to promote and encourage women in engineering and IT. I've been involved in a couple of the events, and I've been part of panels. They do industry talks where they organize industry folks to come in and talk to women who register. Even honoring the Polytechnique massacre on the White Rose Day, like they put on a lot of events to really elevate and support women in engineering and IT. And I think it's one of the only programs of its kind that I've heard of in post-secondary, actively like organizing events specifically for women in this way. And I think it's just, they have so many events going on all the time, and just such great opportunities for women to gain, industry contacts. And again, some part of it is sometimes just like commiserating and learning from other women and knowing you're not alone. I'm a part of a Women in Communication and IT career development program right now, put on by Women in Communication and Technology. And that's part of what we just like talk about. It's just like, it's so nice to know that you're not alone in your experiences, and to get advice from, somebody who's been in a similar situation. And, something we talk about is like what works for, someone who identifies as a man doesn't always work the same for someone who identifies as a woman, and those things. So it's sometimes nice to troubleshoot and work with, other women. So yeah, I can only say good things about the Women in Engineering and IT program that's been put on. And it's just like super well organized and growing every year. So, but as Adrian was saying, like there's so many clubs at Carleton. Like I feel like they grow every year and I can't keep up with them all, but every single one just has like such a great community, part of that community building that we have. You walk around, there's the Mackenzie building is the main engineering building at Carleton, and I feel like I walk that third floor all the time, and like every room is a different club, and there's just like couches in there, and people are like lounging and talking and working on projects. And we have a Leo's Cafe is like the volunteer cafe in Mackenzie, which has like the best food, cheapest food on campus. It, like definitely fueled me for my entire undergrad, and just like the number of people that you see in there just like collaborating, just so many safe spaces to be, and so many safe communities to be a part of. And I think that's just like one of the things that makes Carleton so unique. It's just like inbred and just like ingrained in like everything in the department. It's just wonderful to see and be a part of.
I couldn't agree more. And it's honestly awesome to see us back in person too. I think it was one thing that was severely missed in the pandemic, was that looking at the 3300 block, which is our community and society block, and seeing the interaction between students. Well, this was an excellent conversation. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and sharing all of this wonderful information about the different things that Carleton is doing to help anybody succeed in our programs and really push innovation to where it could be, stemming from different diverse backgrounds. If any of you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to our team as well. I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight, and I hope you have a great evening. That is all for us. Have a great night.